this audiovisual drama and literature are two different tactics and two different things. I would like to tell you more about how I understand this, but before that I would like to set one basic stuff. This will be the foundation of everything that we do in our audiovisual world. If what we do here, and you can see that on the screen, if it's always the same, the thing that doesn't change, it's always a movie. The difference is there are better movies and worse movies. What does a better movie consist in? The better movie is when there is a emotional tension between the screen and the audience. In other words, you can say that what you want to do in the future is you're entering a factory, like every factory worker, but your product are emotions of the audience. If these emotions are not there, the reality that you build disappears. The construction material of your movie are the emotions. If you forget about this basic paradigm of storytelling, you forget about the gist, about the core of what you want to do with your life. Both literary drama and audiovisual drama serve only that one single purpose, to keep this level of tension in your discussion with the audience. It's very important. I will tell you an anecdote, because during such courses, like this one, in Berlin, in film school, at the end of the course, my students brought me a bicycle pump, and they wrote emotions on top of it, because I always said, pump up the emotions, pump up the emotions. And so they gave me a pump just to remember that lecture. Yes, but this is what we're actually doing. We're pumping up the emotions in the audience in front of the TV screens, of movie screens. So now, how do we descend those two elements, because they are different? And I quite often use this symbol of crossing my arms, because the crossing my arms are just like two curves which I drew here. So can you see that even from the far away? This one, you have like a sinusoid-like curve where we're talking about the tonal. The exposure, overexposure, underexposure, etc. But this is a very simplified picture, because it's not always that simple. Tells you about the emotions of the viewer who bought a ticket to the cinema. It's never zero. This is the axis of time, and this is the axis of emotions. So somebody who buys a ticket to a movie confronts their psychological needs with what they see on the screen. This is what is called the targeting of the viewer, because you never make a movie for everybody. You make movies for a certain type of audience, for a targeted audience. If my life is boring, I'm sitting for 8 hours in the office, what am I doing? I go to I'm buying a ticket to a war movie, for example, to emotional movie. A film which has like huge emotional swings. So these expectations is the drive for buying a ticket. And then somebody who is responsible for the drama, for the literary drama, of the drama of the word, of the story, gets a certain time, because the viewer knows that in order to enter some sort of a story, you need to make an exposition. This is the whole role of the first act of the story. Of course, reducing it to some sort of gross oversimplification, the battle for the viewer takes place in the first act. If during the first 15 minutes, well, of course it depends on the genre too, if you cannot catch on the hook your audience, to make the viewer to forget about their real life and to enter our story, we lose them. Click, they change the channel. If they are not or leaving the cinema, or if he doesn't leave the cinema, he feels deep inside that the time and investment that he did, because he's sort of crediting us when he's buying the ticket, this investment is bad. it's lost. So why did I draw here the second curve? Because this is what tells you about the core of the visual drama. We have certain times as storytellers, as the narrators of a story. We have some time to establish emotional link with the viewer. But the viewer does not give us credit when it comes to the visual attack. If we want to introduce the viewer into a certain world, the attack should take place at the very first instant of the movie. This is a decisive moment of audiovisual drama. It stems from a very simple rule. Those who live in Paris, they don't know the city because they were born there. Their view of Paris is totally different from the point of view of a tourist who comes there for the first time. He is suddenly hit by the whole power and beauty of this town and also dark sides of living in such a metropolis. We, as storytellers, we should, from the very outset, we should hit the viewer with all our force. Why this is so important? Because the image and the music, because you also have to talk about music, talk directly to our subconscious. So this line, this storytelling line, is a rational line. To some extent, of course. This rationality has at some point to crumble. We have to believe into this world. We have to believe in this world when we want the audience to enter this world. We have to make them identify with the protagonist. But the world, in my world, which I want to build, not anybody else's, Idziak's world, is the attack. It takes place in the first attack, audiovisual attack, you perform on the audience. Of course, it's not that this attack will come from nobody knows where. It's a certain consequence of a certain idea to which we invite our audience, and we keep them in the style and we keep them in the idea. So this very beginning of the movie, from the point of view of audiovisual drama, is extremely important, and quite often here we're using some extraordinary ways and methods to convince the viewer to our idea, to our vision, to make them subconsciously believe our story. If somebody goes to the cinema and spends a certain amount of money for a ticket, and the ticket opens with like 2 guys just talking, well, it doesn't need to be a bad movie, but if there's just a talking head in the beginning of a movie and what they say it's not very interesting, it kills the mood and imbues the audience with a sense of lost money for the ticket. Because you can, if you have the same thing at home, you can turn on the TV and there's plenty of talking heads there. But if the beginning is intriguing, if this is something we haven't seen before, something that evokes our interest, quite often this is intriguing to the viewer. Of course, it's not a decision, it's not where the opinion forms, but it makes the audience ready to open to the story. Yesterday, during my opening address, I said that a good strategy of our activity in filmmaking is imagining not a viewer waiting for you, because nobody's waiting for you. But imagining a viewer that hates you. Your role is to go beyond their hatred and not believe in that somebody will love what you do. Audiovisual drama, this audiovisual attack in the very outset, can very significantly help you. And of course, it's good to remember that if you set certain style, certain mood, certain idea, it has to be continued throughout the film. But here, of course, I exaggerated a certain thing that consists in that this line goes down. Why this line goes down? Why this curve goes down? It's certain attractions which are very well seen in the beginning of the movie. In the second part of the movie, when the viewer is rather linked to our story, are not so necessary. We keep up a certain style, but we can say some basic basic stuff. The camera, the the visual part should not be explicit. It just supports the story. A certain over-attractiveness in the second part of the movie, the deeper we go into the story, is not as important because if your story is good, the viewer wants to follow the story of the protagonist or protagonist, depending on the story. And certain overflow of visual attractiveness, if you add like this and that and here, it just sort of interferes with following the story. This is a basic definition of this, and here I could end my lecture, because if we transfer that into anything else, you will get certain results depending on your idea. But I still have an hour to talk, so let me talk for 1 hour more. So now I wanted to address DOPs, cinematographers. Those of you who should be responsible for the visual part. You should support the director with your style and your storytelling, visual storytelling. The profession of a cinematographer is a profession which is in majority of schools is not taught right, because there's a big sort of focus on technique, on technology. But here we are pointing your sort of. But the thing is, the cooperation with the director is non-existent, and teaching the cooperation with the director is non-existent. Yesterday, I told you during my opening address, my DOP education was not a film school, but the moment when I started to make my own movies as a director, then I suddenly realized what is the role of a cinematographer. And why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because here we have the basic problem. The filming set is is I would say the worst place for visual decisions. Visual decisions should take place much earlier. There's a certain phenomenon, maybe a bit worn out, but for many years we were talking about the Polish school of cinematography, its originality and visuals originality. Polish movies were winning some international festivals, and this sprung from a certain idiosyncrasy. It consisted in the fact that the Polish film school, which was an idiosyncratic school really, because the communists, because Lenin said that film is the most important sort of art for us, they were lavishing us with money on the film propaganda and the film education. The Łódź Film School was well known for the fact that it was a small production house. It was paranoidal because young students who were coming to the school didn't have the right to work on a filming set with other students, because there was a risk that the other students would inspire them. So you had to use only a professional crew. So when I was a cinematographer and I made my first movie, I would go I got 2 trucks on a filming set. In two trucks I had a professional crew, and they were to inspire me. So it was like a total idiocy, because I would just give a bottle of vodka to my gripper, and I didn't need the help of my friend, because a professional gripper for a bottle of vodka would do everything for me. But this way of teaching this a cinematographer was great from the point of view of the potency that this school had. I will say on the side, I will tell you an anecdote, because that's something that astonishes me even today. This school was a small production house. Very few people realized. I mean, there was only one person who realized that. And it was Jurek Skolimowski, who was nominated to Oscar last year, because he came to that school to study, but in reality he went there to make his feature movie. Out of those etudes and the fact that there was a professional production there, every year he made a piece of his own feature movie. So at the moment when all other students were graduating from that school, and they started to look for the job, he finished school and he had a feature movie which was put to the screen. He's older than me. He's 87 years old. But even today, it proves even today that he's an original creator, and he's an original artist, and he can understand the system, even though he's making these movies away from the system, and he sort of undermines the system in a way. So, if you want to know my remarks about the production system in Poland, I will have a lecture about the nonsenses in the film production that would be good to avoid, because they only cost money that you don't see on the screen. And I will have this lecture in about 2 days' time, so you are heartily invited. But this is just on the side. So, coming back to the fact that a cinematographer in Poland had a chance to learn with professional crews, and we had this Polish school of cinematography, and these films were very original visually, and they won plenty of awards. There were actually only 2 departments in that school. There was no production department, there was an acting department too. So we had the directing department, cinematography department, and the third one was the acting department, and there was no other, because in some other part of Łódź, that's where the actors would learn, so we were pretty separated. So this combination between the DOP and the director was set in stone from the very outset. And even today, I think that this elevated role of the cinematographer, of course, the advances in technology devalues the role of cinematographer, but this high role of cinematographer is a very good structural solution, because he's the eyes and ears of the movie. In the United States, for example, the first person you engage in the United States on the visual part, you get the set designer. This is because you have to build some sort of a set, you have to spend some money. The problem is that the type of education of set designers has nothing to do with the drama and storytelling. Usually these are people who are after, they graduated from fine arts departments or architectural departments, but they don't know anything. Everything is static for them. Anything related to drama, which is dynamic, is a mystery for them. Quite often, in the beginning of the movie, a lot of money is spent for the objects that they build to live in, but they're not interested from the point of view of drama, and they're doing some crazy and stupid stuff. When I first saw that, I was totally numb, because I was working on King Arthur, and the basic decoration, which cost like dozens of millions of dollars, was the Hadrian's Wall. It divided England into the pagan part and the Roman part. So this is a film about the founding myth of Anglo-Saxon culture, about King Arthur, and there was this famous battle next to the Hadrian's Wall, and this Hadrian Wall sort of separated the Picts from the Romans. This wall was built in a valley. It was about 1,200 meters long, and because it was built in a valley, in the lowest point, wherever you put a camera, this 7-meter high wall, which was 3-4 meters broad, it looked like a picket fence. It looked like some meager picket fence. The Chinese wall is also built in valleys. Have you seen a part of a Chinese wall? How when it's built in a valley? It looks like a picket fence. The imposing Chinese wall is the one you see on the top of mountains. So the $12 million was spent on a wall that looked like a fence. In addition, this wall was built in such a way that the sunrise and the sunset was on 2 sides of the wall. So the wall was always, the sun was always had a flat light on the wall. Even the most stupid DOP knows that you have to do a counter shots when you're doing action movies, and there's no option to change it. So for a month, we were shooting action scenes having $12 million behind our backs. So there's not a single shot of this wall in a movie. And this is what this set designer came up with. So reading scripts by a DOP is incredibly important. Because who writes scripts? Those who have better eyes than ears. Sorry, better ears than eyes. It's a different sort of talent. That's why our movies take place in bars and at the table, in bed, in typical locations, because this is the last thing a scriptwriter thinks about. A scriptwriter has to think about the protagonist, about this dramatic curve, about the dialogues, about storytelling, about tensions, about turning points, about structure, blah blah blah, whatever. Locations are the last things that comes to mind of a scriptwriter. Very often, very often, it's enough to change the location and get a fantastic effect. In the film Blue, you probably know you know this. It's a Kieślowski film, a very old one. In a script, they wrote that Juliette she lost a husband and a child. She has some dramatic moments in her life. In order to get out this tension, Kieślowski said that she's running around the streets of Paris. I knew that it's not about running for having a better muscle. It was all about what she has in her head. And I was thinking that I didn't know how. I didn't see this visually. And I suggested to Kieślowski that why shouldn't she go into a pool? So we moved the scene into a pool, and I must say, those of you who remember that movie, there's a memorable scene in the pool because the water gave this metaphoric message about the life and death. She disappears under the water, then reappears. We can see how she works through this crisis, and she goes over the water and she hears music again. So this swimming pool played exactly the role that was the intention of the scriptwriter. But because he put it in a typical place, maybe somebody would find a better idea. I'm not saying that that was the best idea that we could have come up with, but generally, what I wanted to say is that it's very important for you to be aware that the change of a location where you shoot a scene very often leads to the situation where that these scenes are very interesting. So you should analyze your script. You should very diligently analyze your script, and this is what I wrote here. Here we have 4 times P plus S. It's in English. First thing is the protagonist. In the majority of movies, the protagonist is the carrier of emotion. There is a certain process of self-identification with the protagonist, and we fight for the audience to forget about their ego, about their own life, and enter the life of somebody else. Is this important for the cinematographers? Of course it is. Quite often it's enough that you think about the point of view, like an innocent girl who just enters her life, sees world in a different way than a serial killer who wants to kill all his neighbors. This is already a hint for you as the storyteller, how to observe that world. The analysis of a protagonist, what they see and how they see things, will help you to translate the reality one-to-one into the reality that visually works in storytelling. It has a certain dramaturgical weight, and it builds the tension. Second P is plot. Plot is an extremely important thing, and the cinematographer plays an immense role here. But there's a thing I will tell you from my own experience. I made 70 movies altogether. So very often we deal with directors, or the debuting, beginning directors, but also great masters who devalue the material that they work on from the moment of the idea or when they get the script to the moment of when they start to shoot the movie. A very long time passes. What does that cause? That when they enter the set after that long time, they have this feeling that this plot, this basic story, it's not important anymore, and they get very focused on subplots because they are more interesting as they're very fresh. But the rule is very simple: use as much of the main plot. Sorry, again. You can use only as many subplots as your plot is strong, and the DOP should remember about that. Because the DOP is a sort of a witness who does not get burned out in fighting for his movie about his life, etc., etc. Camera, in a functional way, is to service the plot, and it should not be too long, it should not be too short. You should manage the time. It's very, very important. My first movie as a director, after 8 months of sitting in the editing room, was 4.5 hours long, and there was no chance to shorten it because I was shooting the movie for 4.5 hours. Nobody told me in the film school to control time. Spielberg can allow himself to make a 4-hour movie, but not at the beginning as a director. You have to fit into this 2-hour window, including the commercials. So you need to squeeze your story between 1 hour 15 minutes and 1 hour 30 minutes. You should not protract your storytelling. So understanding this mechanism and underlining of a certain, just making a certain roadmap for yourself, trying to put on a script with different colors which are the main plot scenes, which are the subplot scenes. A very important element that helps me is that I find the scenes which you can move around in the script without any problem, because it shows their importance. If the scene is too movable, it means it's not important enough. It's not so important for the whole structure of the story. So this is a thing that you really have to focus on and you really have to analyze. And the drama. If things are boring, we leave the cinema unsatisfied. There was a professor in film school who was teaching us macrophotography. So we came to his classes, we had a microphone and there's a microscope. There was a camera attached to this microscope, and he said, bring me a few stars. I mean, what he wanted us to go out and bring some mud, you would put the mud under the microscope and we would get those bugs or those insects under this microscope. At some point, we were shooting these bugs, and he said, and what is a drama? It's like exam. Everybody felt silent. He said, the audience don't go to the cinema to see that they killed a rabbit. And the viewer comes to the cinema to see how they killed the rabbit. When they strangled the rabbit, how shit falls out of the rabbit, how eyes go out. This is the real drama. The viewer is not interested that the rabbit was killed. They're interested in the process. So, if we put the camera here, outside, and there would be a street and there would be a real-life accident, that would be a horrible scene in the movie. There would be no emotions. Even though you had 3 dead bodies, a huge accident, a lot of police, you would need to be able to show a process from a certain point of view. You have to lead the viewer to certain emotion. A practical example again. Related to what I was telling you about the beginning and how important the beginning is. Coming back to this, I wrote an essay about the visual drama based on this movie. So if you're interested, I will give you a link because it's available online. When I got a script for a movie Blue, Piesiewicz and Kieślowski wrote a scene there in the very beginning. that we see a motorway. The cars are approaching. The camera focuses on one of the cars, and the camera zooms into that car. And when this car is about to disappear under the bridge, so the camera should stand on top of the bridge. So there's a stop and a freeze frame, and in the freeze we can see a man and a woman and a child. And I said, how is this possible to from a top of a bridge to show a man and a woman and a child? You will not see the child, who's sitting on the back. I said, maybe the child will not be seen. And I said, this is how you want to show your feature movie, and got him to thinking. And the Blue, the film Blue, it was sensational at that time because we had to build the whole part of equipment. We had to build a piece of equipment. So the camera starts from a moving wheel, and then it starts from dark, and the light starts from two sides after a while, and we can hear the motor running. After a while, the car stops because the driver wants to go to take a pee, and you can see like the drops falling down from the mechanism of a car. And that was a much better scene than just a view from the top of a bridge. Each one of us is a driver. This is the last thing that you're thinking when you're driving a car. And here, visually, from the point of view of drama, it puts you against the situation before the accident happens. It tells you the story, what we normally avoid when we're driving a car. It's a good example how from a very, I would say, very average beginning, you can make a beginning that really grasps the viewer from the very first moment. It pushes the viewer into your story. So dramaturgical problems mainly related to that main plot is very important. So highlight this with a very distinctive color, because you have to spend time on this and give a chance to your audience to understand where you're going. Making an action scene, you always have to remember that we are dealing with the viewer who sits comfortably in a chair, and he saw like hectoliters of blood and thousands of wounds and deaths, and they're really resilient to that already. One of the techniques in the action movie is a technique of leading the viewer to a certain feeling of unease related to survival. We all come from the people who are living in a forest, next to, within the range of the light of a bonfire, and this process has to be very fast. We have to have everything under our control. In the primeval forest, you get a man coming into the light from the darkness, and you saw this man. You had only a fraction of a second to decide whether you want to fight, you want to flight. But the decision has to be taken in an instant. So this element of keeping everything under control is related to the technique of making action scenes, because we'll put so many things in action scenes without giving a chance to the viewer to analyze this. A good test is to show to a group of students the beginning of a movie by Spielberg, the Saving Private Ryan, and you give them a piece of paper and tell them to write down what the sequence was about. I promised you they will not be able to recreate more than 20% of this sequence, because this inability to control of what we see and the absurds that flow in your direction from the screen. If you look at action movies, you can see how many absurds are in those movies. So making a movie with Ridley Scott was always consistent in the fact that you have a certain shot. We had a cinemascope, And in the foreground, the soldiers are fighting. In the background, you had transporters and shooting in our direction. Behind the transporters, you have houses on fire. Before the people who are shooting, you have explosions. Yeah, the earth is flying everywhere. Ridley Scott was saying, please put here one more helicopter there and 2 helicopters in the background there. Why do you need the helicopters? Because it's very simple. He uses this technique that there, especially in action scenes, there cannot be a single peaceful resting element in the shot. This overabundance serves exactly what I was telling you about. Now think, when you look at the scenes of different sword and sandal movies and I don't know, knife movies, whenever there's a battle, you have explosions in the foreground. Where do the explosions come from? Because they have just arrows and bows. So what's exploding in front of the camera? But we do explosions sort of remorselessly in every shot to get a density of action, especially in action scenes. The more dense, the more crazy, the better. But we have to understand this mechanism. That is why in our activities about the audiovisual drama in my courses, we discern the typicality of certain scenes, because we're not doing any scenes anew. I did millions of scenes in the hospitals, hundreds scenes of accidents, and the viewer is a very well educated filmmaker, not practically, but they've seen hundreds of such scenes, and they automatically compare the scenes between the movies. So he knows everything that we want to present him. So you have typical scenes like love scenes. This model of scenes has got really devalued. How to refresh this? How to make it? It's like overused. We're all peeping toms. We all like it, but it's very important that in this hour peaking tominess to find an element that will be surprising. An element that the viewer hasn't seen yet. The camera in those scenes, in those typical scenes like action scenes, the love scenes, the chase scenes, the dialogue scenes, every time it plays a different role. Sometimes a camera needs to be unseen, and sometimes it's not really bad to have the camera tangible, or to have the camera being present in the scene. I'm not able to tackle all the topics in one single lecture, but I wanted to make you aware that as potential authors, DOPs, but also directors, of course, you should analyze very deeply what has been done and how it has been done, because there is a certain typicality of approach, and sometimes it's enough, just as I've mentioned, from a very primitive change of location to seeing how others do that. You should analyze and do it slightly differently, because it refreshes the scene and it upholds the tension, emotional tension in the audience. Anything that is quite often overlooked. The filmmaking process is a many years process. It lasts for many years, especially if it's your first movie. So somebody has an idea. They write. They write a script. Quite often the directors are also authors of their scripts, which has its virtues and its vices. And then you go into the waiting room. So they try to get the funding. They try to convince potential collaborators, actors, producers, editors to give the money, and so on and so on. So what do? They are like a traveling merchant who repeats again and again the same phrases, the same story about his ware, which is his ware is his movie. So at the moment when he enters the set for the first day, that's what I was talking about, the subplots. So on the first day, the first shooting day, the director is already totally devoid of emotions that accompanied the recording of the first idea. It's not a beloved wife anymore. It's not like his first love. He, psychologically, the director is very close to divorce, and he just enters the set. He just enters the set and starts to make his movie. Can you avoid that? Not really, but there are certain tools that can help you in this emotional crisis. And here I highly recommend to the cinematographers to use those tools. One of the two is the fourth one, is the message. You can't have a situation when on one day the film tells this story and on another day it tells another story. You want to tell a story that would stay forever in the memory of our audience. Romeo and Juliet is not a play about love. Well, it is about love too, but it's a play which creates a catharsis, evokes catharsis in the viewer, who understands at it that this sacrifice of those two people in love stems from this hatred between two families. So the families hated one another, but the effect of this death is that these families reconciled. And this is something that we always hunt for in the cinema, that we have this feeling of final emotional movement without the final message, which in this case, of course, I'm the last person to explain to you the plots of films, but here I would say it's love is stronger than death. It allows us to go through a certain work of art having a very clear guideline. This element of death, which is present very strongly in the history of Romeo and Juliet from the outset, underlined in certain signs, bad omens of looming danger, allows you to prepare the viewer to this last moment of catharsis, where those two young people are already have already passed away. So this moment from the very start of the movie to the production, there's so much time passes that the directors start the movie about something, and then after a month it's a movie about something else, and at the end it's a totally different movie, and the final result is totally confused. And I worked with a lot of such directors who are talented, but they have something which I call I would say diarrhea of ideas. Excuse my French. So they have like idea every day, and their ideas are great, but the ideas are just everywhere. So there is such poetic. It's a poetic of a Christmas tree. A Christmas tree has like all those glass bulbs and a lot of stuff, and the more of it, the better. All these like lights and bulbs hide the drama of a dying tree. It's exactly the same as with our movie. So you had a lot of shiny bulbs and lights, etc., but the basic drama, the basic plot disappears under all this embellishment. So if you have this premise, this basic message, you can avoid that. Your premise should be your guideline. It should be your roadmap. You should have it set firmly over your bed, and every day when you get up to go to the set, you should look at this and understand once again what is your premise and your story to tell. The story that makes your idea, that makes your Hamlet different from hundreds of other Hamlet stagings in the world. You have to tell the actor, the set designer, the scriptwriters, why the fuck do you make the Hamlet again? Why your Hamlet today, here and now, will be more interesting than the Hamlet which will be made in a different theatre 2 years before or 2 years after. So this element is extremely important. Also, from the point of view of a Christmas tree, so that your visual activities would have a certain structure, a certain goal, would start from the same root. So, techniques, what I do, and I really recommend doing this. I've been writing scripts every now and then. I did some movies as a director. But when I was getting a script from somebody else, I got a lot of them because my agent pretended that he's a workaholic, so he got me a lot of scripts. Some of them I sort of glimpsed over, some of them I read profoundly. And sometimes I was interested in a director and I knew that the story is good. And if I was really interested, I would lock myself in a room, I would turn off my phone, and I read the script from the beginning to the end, without any breaks, without a coffee, without any pause, to have the journey made in a one chunk of time. And after that reading, I had a few minutes reserved where I wrote down what came to my head. Without any analysis, without any sort of serious analytical tools. I was just writing. What I call it photographing my emotional state. So quite often these notes, which were a bit obscure, their meaning came back in retrospect afterwards. When I was already later in the production, when I was preparing myself for the production, I was coming back to my notes because that's where the key to the story was. The key I was not aware of when I was doing the notes. So I was trying to separate my emotions. I was trying to be a potential viewer from the very beginning, and I didn't read that as a DOP. I was reading this as a viewer, and I was noting my emotions as the emotions of the viewer, of a potential viewer that has just left the cinema and has his impressions processed in their head. That was a photography of my state of mind, allowed me later to explain certain things, to come up with ideas. It was a certain foundation for my work as the cinematographer. We should come up with some sort of a clip-on microphone, because this doesn't work. I think I told you everything. I can speak for a week, of course, but is there anything important I could mention here in this short time before the next lecture? It's very important also to wake up this inner child in you. My daughter is present here with us in Film Springhopen. When she was a small child, I asked her to draw a car. She drew a car just like a child would do, like those wheels and windows. And I said, now draw a driver. And she drew a driver. But you could see everything that you normally don't see in a car. I said, Urszulka, but you normally don't see the legs of a driver. But she said, how come? Because a child sees the legs of a driver, even if it's out of the car. So, for example, Amelie, you look at her and you can see her heart beating. And the child sees that heart. So wake up your inner child, wake up your originality, wake up your imagination. Quite often, this is a great method. And don't try to overcomplicate things. I'll tell you an anecdote. There was a Polish director, a late director, Morgenstern, and he made a movie and he sent this movie to a festival. At that time, you had those films shot from those like metal cassettes. You had 5 or 6 rolls there, and so he suddenly jumps into the cabin, and started shouting, "Yo, you mixed up the rolls. You showed the 4th scene instead of a 3rd one." And he runs up to the jury, and the jury says, "Wow, you got the first prize." So I don't wish such successes to you guys. So in short, so much from me. I would like to invite you to Jacek's lecture, which will come shortly in this very hall about artificial intelligence. It's really worth following because this is our future. Without that, we will not move on. So in a few minutes, in 20 minutes, Jacek will have his lecture. Once again, thank you, and I wish you all the success in the Arri group. Olivier, in the
when you like to meet them afternoon, because you can, I like you to have a meeting with them today. What time? What is the best for you?
Should we say after lunch, maybe, or
What? 1 o'clock is the... No, 1 o'clock we have a lunch. So maybe 2:30? 2:30, because they have enough time to eat. Okay, so I don't know why it happened, but I let you know our production. So go to the office and they let you know in which room.
For all of you, attention, remember that you should check at which room you have a meeting with Oliver at 2:30 p.m. He will introduce you to the movie he wants to make. He will introduce you to his way of thinking, and your true work and true adventure will start. Thank you very much.